just want to say thanks in advance for the questions you're going to answer today. Thanks for honest answers as well. And we're just looking forward to tapping really into your wisdom and your experience too. If we ask a question, don't feel you have to answer it. You can throw the ball to somebody else on the team as well if you want to do that. It can be a short or longer. Just keep throwing it. Answer. And so don't forget the number will come up on the screen if you want to do that. But hey, first question, and maybe this could go to all three of us, starting with Pastor Andre. Maybe what's been your maybe biggest mistake in ministry, or perhaps might phrase it as what have you learned the most from? Like, what was the biggest learning opportunity you've gone through, or biggest mistake? We're just going to get straight into it this morning. No light questions.
There's so many.
What's the biggest one?
Probably the biggest one was being hesitant to lead. Because I was we grew up in a pastoral environment, so loving the sheep and caring for the sheep it took precedence over leadership. Anytime you stepped out and led, it was perceived you didn't love God's people. And I had to learn that late and step into it. I wish I knew that sooner, because I would have been a more effective leader, would have been a more fruitful leader if I'd caught that earlier.
Wow. Good, great answer. Pastor Jedediah?
Yeah, I think being a young leader, you have, I led small groups and then a young adult ministry, and then I remember transitioning to being in an executive role and calling my senior pastor after I had left and just apologizing, and everything was ended well, transitioned so phenomenal. And he's like, you did great. And I go, no, I actually thought some of the things that were growing under me were because of me. Now realizing that the grace that's on everybody in a church is on the mantle of the leader. So your gift is actually being graced because God called the senior pastor, not just because you have a great gift. So you're communicating, like, look at the growth, look at the fruit, like we're doing something, but you forget that it's actually the mantle on the senior leader that's producing favor on your gift. And there's a lot of people that actually have great young adult ministries and start churches that never succeed, because they thought it was their grace, but it was actually the grace on leadership that was producing the fruit for their gift.
So what would you do differently now knowing that?
I'm just recognition, yeah. It's an honor thing. You realize that the senior leader's the one that was called by God. They're the one that was been given the vision by God. They're actually the one that's risked everything. If you're in any other position but a senior leader, there's not a lot on the line for you. It's not your name attached to the ministry. So I think it was just recognizing honor, and obviously the ability to have authority over something starts with your ability to be under something. So you see the story of the centurion where he goes to Jesus. I don't mean to preach long, but goes to Jesus and he says, I'm like you. He says, I am like you. You can just say the word, but he says it this way, I'm like you because I'm a man who was under authority in over 100 soldiers. So he actually recognizes that Jesus was under something, not just over something, and his authority was positioned not based on who he was over, but actually who he was actually under.
That's great. Awesome answer. Pastor Adam?
I think for me, obviously lots of mistakes have been there, but I think if I look in general over my life in leadership, I think the biggest thing that's perhaps not a mistake that's affected me is probably insecurity. So, even as Jedediah was giving that answer right there, I thought I was starting to feel insecure about my answer. It was just like, it was like, but I think what's been great for me, it's like my one's not going to be as good as that. But I tell you, that's just a part of the reality, and just being able to move past it, and again, it's just a big learning curve for me. And I remember trying to meet guest speakers or stuff, and Anita would say, stop trying to impress people, because I'd try to, I'd see some fancy guest speaker or something, and I'd go, I better cross the room and shake their hand, and then I'd walk and there'd be a little trip thing, and I'd fall over and look like, and all that did was add to the insecurity and stuff. But just being able to push through it and move through it, and just realize that, I didn't choose to do this. If God could have chosen anyone, so he's put me in this place, and so I've got to be the shepherd of the flock. I've got to be that leader. I've got to be that person, even though sometimes I don't feel feel like it. And so I would say throughout ministry, and I'm not saying, hey, I've conquered it, it's just all finished now and I'm just like super secure. Because that would be a lie. The reality is, I mean, even when I'm picking up guest speakers, I'm like freak out, nervous. Take a bill? No, don't take a bill. But I get nervous. I get nervous meeting people, and then we all relax or whatever, but it's just part of... is there any other insecure people here?
Yeah. We were nervous being picked up.
Wow, come on. No, thank you, Pastor Adam, for... that deserves a hand clap, I think. That was... Thank you for the honesty. As well. Hey, another question just come through. What's your biggest, maybe to Jedediah, what's your biggest challenge in your ministry life? What would be one of the biggest challenges you face?
There's so many. I think obviously continuing to grow and not settling. You know, we're in a season where there's some incredible things that have happened and there's great favor on it. And we were talking about this last night. You know, there's these seasons where you have success and there's significance, and then a lot of people settle. And I feel like continuing to saying there's a demand for an increased capacity. We could never stop learning and growing, and we're in a season where we're behind closed doors, where a lot of people are saying, look what God's doing, this is it, and we're saying this is not it.
Wow.
And I feel like maybe some of the great leaders out there that you would know, like a Craig Rochelle or Stephen Furtick, you know, when they're a few years in, they were having explosive growth, and it would have been very, very easy to say, this is it. 10,000 people, a few campuses, 3 years, like it's church growth history, like this is it, but something inside of them said, this is not the goal. Like we have not arrived. I guess it would be constantly reminding yourself there's no arriving. So once you realize that you're never going to arrive, you have to continue to strive and not force it, but it's just this demand for personal growth, personal stewardship, personal discipline, and I just don't think that stops.
How do you keep yourself growing? You know,
I just regurgitate all of Pastor Andre's messages.
Come
I
on.
read his
Yes.
books, and I take pictures of his PowerPoints.
Wow.
Super simple.
Wow.
Buy the book pack or you're a fool, you know?
Well, this next question actually could go to you, Pastor Andre. How do you prepare your messages? I mean, they're phenomenal messages. And how do you prepare?
I listen to Jedediah stuff and
He doesn't
Wow.
listen to mine, so now I feel his.
Wow.
Is this a serious
Do you want to elaborate? Yeah, do come through, yes.
I see my ministry as a bit like a doctor, a physician. You read the condition of people, you read their temperature, their nourishment levels, and then you prescribe food to grow them or to heal them. So one needs to read the church. Obviously, it's more difficult when you travel. You know that it's good vitamins you're giving out. You know, good food is good food. Presented. So if you come to a conference, whatever messages you preach, they're generally going to be good, but you're trying to see what's needed, ideally, and I can't profess to be someone who's really like that prophetic, but I try and read and then prescribe the health. So read the country, read the people, and then prescribe the medicine. And I kind of do that. I try and do three things when preparing. I try and teach something that's helpful that you can do, because I want to know I always want people to know what they must be and what they must do. Otherwise, you can get concepts and it's like, wow, that's amazing. People need to know what to do. So last night, Jedediah preached and he led us to a place of action. Action. Get people out, respond. A very important thing. And I enjoy conceptual messages, but I think it's better if you're building a church to do that. Something practical, something that they need to do. Something that's interesting, because if you can hold people's interest, so I tell a lot of stories and quotes and keeps people's interest, and then tell them something they never heard before, without, violating scripture. Those are good ingredients to keep a church fed and nourished and keep it momentum and interesting. So I try and do that.
How do you read 3 books a week or however often it is?
With difficulty.
Yeah.
Just a lot of practice and a lot of discipline. And I have my phone, books on the phone. So if I'm waiting anywhere or I've got downtime, someone's late to a meeting, I'll pull it out, read 3 pages. I'm constantly trying to use the time wisely. Instead of wasting time, because you can only give out what you're getting in, and you have to, at my age, you have to keep restoring yourself. You know, when you're young, when you were talking now, life is like a fruit tree. You spend all your time growing yourself and bearing fruit. But then there comes a time at my age now where I've got to let the fruit fall off and into the ground so that other trees can grow.
Wow.
But a fruit tree that dies doesn't feed anybody. So I've got to constantly now be bearing fruit. And the longer you've been alive, the more you need God to do in you so that you can plant. I think it gets harder as you get older. And I never want to be that person that gets to the place where I'm the expert, been there, done that, know that. Oh yeah, I preached on that. I want something fresh all the time, and I think it's a challenge for all of us, young or old. So yeah.
Great. This next question is, what do you guys do to just recharge, to get refreshed, or hobbies, or things like that? Anybody? Pastor Adam?
For me, I think, I don't do golf. I do pretty cool dancing.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a special moment for all of us.
Yeah.
I just realised as I was doing it, that's going to go on YouTube or somewhere and be on that. What did you say about that? It's going to be global.
Instant, global, permanent.
Oh. To my grandchildren, there's your grandpa a long time ago. For me, basically, I don't do golf, I don't do that. I like riding motorbikes, and as you know, also I joined the fire service a few years ago, and so I like fighting fires and rescuing people from crashes and stuff like that.
So they just call you, got a pager on you, they call you up and you just shoot out a meeting?
Any time, day on. Oh no, I won't do it on I don't do it on Sunday because I'm trying to rescue people from another fire on Sunday. Come on, Sunday. But basically, I have 24/7 on a pager to respond. Yeah.
Wow.
Been doing that for 6 years. Got a couple of medals now.
Fantastic.
I'll bring him to the next conference.
Fast, did you get a tie? Love it.
For me, a couple things I do, just because we are traveling, or if you're a senior leader, you're speaking every Sunday, I try to find places that I can go and just sit, so I don't need to speak. Me and my wife will pick a spot, or our team will pick a place every year like you guys are doing, where we're just going to go be in the room. We're going to be in the atmosphere. We don't need to be known, don't need preferred sitting, just want to be fed. So that's very important to continue to find times with God. Also for me, it's a lot of family time. I don't want to I grew up in a missions model where you gave everything and had nothing. And then now I'm in a season, I think it's great for every leader to make sure you don't give the world what you don't give your family.
Yeah, that's very good.
So I want to give my family my best and my first, not my last and what's left over. And that's a challenge because you're with people, you're loving people, and then you come home and you're like, I'm just so tired, I'm so exhausted. So even when I'll fly back home, I'll actually start mentally recharging myself because my kids don't need what's left after a week of ministry. They need what's best. So if I'm going to give the world all my time, I'm going to give my family time. If I'm going to give the world money, I'm going to spend outrageous amounts of money on my own family. I used to not be that way. I'd put my family on a budget so we could bless people, but they didn't agree to it. And I'm like, is God, that's not a limited pie. So why would I have to starve them to bless somewhere else? So I want to give them. And so that for me, it's very significant to make sure that I get refreshed being plugged in with my family. And also when I see other people winning. Like I just love celebrating with other leaders. So I think lots of conversations. One of the great injustices is doing ministry isolated, which especially for the older generation, that was the journey of most people. The work in the field is so much funner. It's not a word, but I like to say it. It's so much funner when you know who's in the field with you. You know their name, and I see great leaders all the time with their head down, but their hand's not out. They're not grabbing anyone else's hand to have a conversation. And sometimes those conversations, even Pastor Andre, when we were transitioning the church, it's like, just thank God this is breathing into me. Someone else's journey, someone else's season, and actually someone else's victory. I might not be winning right now, but you're winning. And if you're winning, then I'm winning. And then I'm going to celebrate your victory, and it just kind of propels me into my own victories.
Great, fantastic. Good. This next question, Pastor Andre, so this is a good one, I guess, for senior pastors, actually. How do we shift a church from a culture of not tithing to a culture of tithing?
I think anything you want to see in a church, you need to teach. And when you teach, people respond. But before you teach, you need to model. So John Maxwell has a 5-step process that's very common to raise up people. It's model, mentor, motivate, monitor, multiply. Most of us start with mentor, motivate, monitor. Now it starts with model. So if you're going to teach something, you first got to be doing it. So make sure in the services, if you want to shift your church, make sure you're giving. There's nothing worse than being in a church service, and many of you have seen this, anywhere, conference, church service, where the front row of leaders is preoccupied with their phones. They're not worshiping. Then one of them gets handed the mic and they come up on the stage. Come on, let's lift up a shout of praise. I'm thinking, that's what we were doing while you were on your phone. Come on now.
Yikes.
People do what people see, not what people say. And so if you want your people to give, give. Sometimes you need to talk about it and tell people what you're doing. Tell them about the sacrifices you're making. And also tell them, God wants our money. I don't want your money. There's a slight shift there. Deuteronomy chapter 16, it says, no man should appear before the Lord empty-handed. So you should teach the congregation that giving is like singing. The two go together. Hebrews 13, I mentioned it last night. We need to lift up a sacrifice of praise and do good. That needs to be part of church culture. And then teach and instruct the people. Point out the duty of giving, but also the blessing of giving. And what you teach, you will get.
Great, thank you. This next question comes from a business guy. I'm not in formal ministry, but I'm in a senior leadership role in a large organisation. What would you want me to take away from conference to do differently Monday to Friday? Either Pastor Jedediah or Pastor Andre?
I'll jump in on this. It's so significant for us to think that church is not something we come to. A church is something you come to, it's something you leave. Christ didn't die so that we could come to church. He died so that we could become the church. Which means when you become the church, church is not just one of the things you do on a Sunday and you do all these other things. It's everything you do. So if you're a business leader to that specific business leader, you're not a business leader who's creating funds to resource the church. It's actually the church's business. So when you're actually operating the business, it's the kingdom that's operating the business. If you're an educator, you're not teaching and enduring a vocation so then you can come to worship and give your tithe and make a difference in Sunday school. It's actually the church doing the teaching. The church is the educator. So it would be the shift that what you're doing Monday through Saturday is as significant and just as representative of the church into the world. So if that was the mindset, how would the kingdom be leading that business? How would be the kingdom be serving that organization? How would be the kingdom educating those kids? And then it allows everything you do to have eternal significance because it's attached to you being the church, just not you going to the church.
Great. This next one here comes from Nelson, from Jude Saxon out there. How do you, maybe this one's you, Adam, how do you keep doing what you're doing? You know, how do we survive the long haul in ministry?
Have an amazing wife who, she keeps me in line and in order and tells me what I need to hear, sometimes when I don't want to hear it, when no one else will. But I think, again, it's just, for me, I couldn't do what I do without a sense of call. So I don't think in any of my ministry life I've ever chased after it as such. It's come to me, and sometimes it's taken me a long time to respond or step into it, because I'm aware of not just, it's cool to sit on stage, but it's the pain of ministry too behind the scenes. So you've got to have that call in your life. You've got to know that God wants you to do that, and just be able to rest in that, because when it's all falling to pieces or something's not going how you thought it should, that's when you're gotta just I know that God has called me for this. So that's how I keep going. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to. There's just too much stuff that goes on that would bring pain sometimes and stuff. So for me, it's just I have that call. I just know that that when I'm standing up here, I know that I should be doing that. I know that I should be, God's called me to that place. So that's how for me anyway.
How do you push through those moments where it does get tough. I mean, even a month ago, you had a close family member
Yeah.
pass away, you know, leading up to conference.
Yeah.
That was a big deal for you guys, had to
Yeah.
go overseas. How do you just keep...
I just keep
pushing
going.
through?
Just keep going. Just don't. I remember Tommy Barnett saying, "You might feel like quitting, just don't. You can feel like it, just don't. Just keep going, because there's a brighter day. You know, the darkest hour is just before dawn. The sun's about to come up. So it's always knowing what's ahead. He can take us through the valley of the shadow of death, and I just get emotional thinking because you just reminded me of that. You know, it takes you through the valley of the shadow of death, but he leads you to green pastures, and so I just keep going, push through.
Great. Pastor Andre?
I think that I've looked at people, I've always wondered why people in ministry would end up falling away and going back to work, giving up, becoming atheists. Why do people fall into adultery? Whenever you lose sight of your future, you always go back to your past.
Wow.
And I said that on, was it Wednesday night? Israel did that. As soon as they lost sight of their future, they went back. So you have to have fresh vision all the time, fresh goals, fresh vision to keep you going. Otherwise, you will look back. Paul says, forgetting that which is behind, I press on to lay hold of that which lies ahead. So I think what Pastor Adam's saying is extremely important, the call of God. You've got to know that, especially if you're in full-time ministry, because that you'll fall back on. But you need vision all the time. Vision will propel you into the future. And that's what stops me from falling away, doing stupid stuff. You're traveling, you're away from home. You know, what keeps you? We're not better than other people. We're not superheroes. We're just normal people. It's the vision of what we're going to accomplish, what God's calling us to do. We just can't go backwards to what we were like before.
Thank you, guys. This question here comes from a younger person. My parents, maybe Jedediah, my parents don't believe in God. They've always made fun of me for coming to youth. How do I overcome this?
That's a great question. Processing. I think for that individual specifically, obviously you have a new family. Doesn't mean you don't, walk away from your family significant, but you obviously got to be attached to a community, because you're not going to get what you need from your parents. You're not going to get for some of you young kids, you're not going to get information. You're not going to be encouraged to go to church. You're going to be ostracized for going to church, which for that individual is very significant to grab a hold of a new community. So whether that's a small group, whether that's your youth leaders, whether that's mentorship, that's the beautiful thing. When God created the church, he introduced himself as a father, although he was never a son, and he's not really a father, he's God. But he introduced this idea of family because he knew that we would need family when we were walking away from the world. So, and I would encourage you to connect to that family, because that's going to be your source of comfort and encouragement. And then I would also be praying for your parents, praying that God would give you grace, praying that God would still give you the capacity to honor. Just because your parents can't maybe honor what God's doing in your life doesn't mean you're now qualified to dishonor them. So you'd have to challenge yourself, no matter how old you are, to say, God, how do I still honor you? And the beautiful thing is you're not honoring them, you're actually honoring God.
Yes.
Honor is between you and God for a person, not just between you and that person. It's like when you make a covenant, I'm making a covenant with my wife. I'm making a covenant with God for my wife. God was for my wife. So regardless of what she does, I'm still obeying and honoring because I've made this agreement.
Yeah.
So the challenge would be, how can you be a light? How can you stay connected to a community? And how can you still do the things that you might not want to do because your parents have disqualified themselves, maybe in your mind, from receiving honor, receiving obedience? You still want to be able to serve them and watch what that gives you access to, and also leads them to Jesus. The testimony of your life alone is a witness. And so often you might say, I have the truth, but your witness does not look like you do. Mm-hmm. So it's very significant, no matter what they're doing to you, that you make sure you continue to be a witness and continue to model God's principles. And that will be a testimony to them, whether now or later.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Pastor Andre, you mentioned yesterday, the day before, learning how to ask good questions. So if you were me, what question would you ask on this panel?
That person needs money. Brilliant, brilliant.
Wow, it depends what everyone's got a different need. I think it's very important to ask questions, because that's how you learn. And the more you ask questions, the more you stay in a place of humility and growth. The less questions you ask, the more you know. You presume you know. And most of us don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. When you know what you don't know, that's when you can grow. So I think we have to. It would be difficult to ask questions. There'll be young people here like asking questions about parents. Senior pastors asking questions. How can I grow my church? And it's a certain size. Senior pastors who are older are saying, "Hey, I see you older. How do you keep going? And what does your next season look like?" So I think the questions to this panel would be all different.
How do you ask questions? So, I mean, who mentors you? Who's someone that looks up to you, and how would you ask questions just to learn from?
I try and do what Jedediah does. Every year I take some of my key team, and we go to a conference where we're not sitting in the front row, we're not in the green room, and we're not sort of honored, and we just go and sit and learn and look. Not to be critical, just to learn. We get a different perspective, and we get ministry, and we choose somewhere where there's good speaking. We'd be selective of the speakers and so on and their dynamics. But then I also get to meet with senior leaders who are ahead of me. So people that I respect highly in the world today are people that have done the journey and are older than me. So Ed Young Sr., he's 78, still preaching. Andy Stanley's father, he's still preaching in his late 70s as well. And I look at their mega churches and how they've done the distance. Andy Stanley's father's wife walked out on him. Yeah. And he's continued. The denomination said he should step down. He's done no obvious sin. It's just that she just got fed up with the ministry and fed up with him. But he's persevered. So those are people I look to because they're ahead of me. They've got energy, passion. They're not jaded. They're not know-it-alls, and they're still leading and developing their churches. They may not be raising up the younger generation like we're trying to do, but there's a lot I can learn from them. So people like you mentioned him just now from that hot place, man, in America, the desert. Tommy Barnett. Sorry, it's age. Tommy Barnett, I visited his church, Pastor Tommy. I had lunch with him, spent an hour with him, took him for lunch, asked him numerous questions that on a piece of paper. How do you do this? How do you do that? How did you react when your son did this? How did you raise up your sons? What are the challenges between you and your son? Because I've got a son in ministry running a campus. So those are the kind of things I would look to. And then I'd read people's books to learn, to get into their minds. All the time. You have to have people ahead of you that you can learn from, even if they're not your model. You know what I mean? They don't run a contemporary church. They sing old hymns. No, that's not the issue. Church is much broader than that. Their lives are much deeper than that. So.
And this is relevant in business, sports, whatever arena you're really in, isn't it? Just find people like that.
Can I jump in on that? So I think for the young people, I mean, we're in environments all the time where it's shocking. You could be there, and most people just want to tell you what's going on. You know, and of course we're trained to just ask questions. And if you're a young person, questions I love to ask my leaders, obviously, what can I do better? You know, so often we're trying to ask an impressive question instead of an aggressive question, which would actually challenge you. So you're like, how can I posture this so they think I'm really intelligent by the way I pose my question? But ask questions to actually grow, like that would be challenging. You know, like I shared with Pastor Andre, he said, how can I preach better after speaking? Like, no, you're like the hero. What could I do better? How could I in language I love to ask, how can I serve you better? Like, how could I be a better team member? What would you see areas that I could improve immediately? If I could add a new habit to my life tomorrow, what would that look like? So I think it's so significant for leaders not to just ask, hey, where are you going? Or what's the vision? Or who speaks into your life? But really, if you ask anyone on your team, I would also say this, don't just ask up, ask down. Like if you're a team leader, you're asking the person above you, but I guarantee if you asked your team and had a moment of vulnerability, hey guys, how could I lead you better? They all know. It's a position, and it's not for them to disown it. It's actually, how can we all get better? Like, what could I do? Well, if you would actually send me an email out the week before instead of the night before, it would help me prepare better as a creative team. If you actually showed up on time when we're all here on time, like if you actually open that up to your church, even if you asked your team members on your church, if you just did a questionnaire, hey, what could the teams do better? Everybody at the lowest level knows how to improve it because they're carrying it constantly. We're leading it and watching it, but they're carrying it. So I encourage you, don't just ask questions up, ask questions down, and you'll be surprised at what comes from it.
I think that it's one of the most important things in churches for leaders is to create an environment where people can do that, where it's not like, oh, don't touch the Lord's anointed, don't ever, don't speak, and then there's so much fear in the room, and I might lose my job. And so I think for us at Connect Church, we create that environment in our staff so that they can, they don't fit, they can. I mean, my daughter does it to her dad, that sucked. That wasn't very good, or you should shift that or move. But we'll give as good as we take. Even my mother will do. She comes and says, oh, the music was a bit this and or whatever. She's not loud or whatever. She'll say that needs fixing. And again, it's just we've created an environment. I'm not like, how dare you say that to the man of God. I think it's so important that we don't get on our high horse about. Because again, we're doing this together, right? We're not doing it for me or for. We're doing it for him, and we want to do the best that we can. And so we need to create a place where people can speak that without getting offended. And it's got to go both ways as well. You got to create that place.
Can I jump in here? Yep. I think once you've created a culture of honor, then you need a culture of honesty.
Yeah. Wow.
Culture of honesty without honor is disaster. Because then everyone feels free to chip their opinion in, and it becomes a free-fall. So culture of honor, then a culture of honesty. Because all of us have got blind spots. I did a message on this once on blind spots. A blind spot in your eye is something in the middle of where you're actually looking that you can't see. It's like a black dot. And sometimes right in the middle of what you're looking at, you can't see. So every now and again, we get our staff meeting to speak back. One of my young guys, one of my best young guys, he stood up and he said, I just want to say this. And I was like, oh, I hope it's not, too bad. He said, I went through a season of 3 months where I felt I was being overlooked. Everyone else was getting opportunity, and I wondered if I'd ever get taken up, and I'd get anywhere in this church. And I was like, what? Didn't know that was in his heart. But it helped me understand some of the struggles he was having, and I helped accelerate his journey. He's one of my best people. But I would never have known that. It may have taken me years to find that out. So I think there needs to be a lot of room for that. I think it's vitally important. And this thing of touching the Lord's anointing is just it's insecurity hidden away behind spiritual talk, I think. As long as the culture of honor, honesty needs to prevail.
Yeah, I remember Andy Stanley said loyalty publicly gives you leverage privately. Yes. So it's just about being able to honor in the pub, but in that place, just that gives you that leverage.
Fantastic. We've got time for one more question. And to our two overseas guests, what's your favourite part of being in our nation of New Zealand?
I love your multiculturalism. I think it's quite unique in the world, and it's quite wonderful. I think the nations all respect each other and get on with each other in quite a beautiful way. I don't know if you can see it, but coming here, I can see it. The world's getting more and more divided, more and more polarized, more and more sensitive. Maybe that's beneath the surface here, and I don't know, because everyone, people are people. But I think you've got a uniqueness about you. There's a wonderful spirit of hospitality. There's a spirit of humility over the nation, yet there's a strength. Sometimes humility can be downtrodden, but you've got a humility with a strength. Especially a young generation, not to say the older generation, but the younger generation has got a confidence that's admirable, that's tempered with a humility. It's a good combination for being world changers. Yeah.
Come on. Obviously, the All Blacks. It's probably come on. Do we have any All Black fans in here? No, I think it's the moment that we're in. For me, to be honest, and I think it's the being able to. I mean, I'm honestly every night I'm going home, every moment in worship, I'm just like, God, I can't believe you're allowing me to be in the room. Forget holding the microphone. Forget being able to hear Pastor Andre or Pastor Adam firsthand, and not just from a podcast, but how are we allowed to be in this moment and watching what's taking place? This nation's never been more united. Obviously, we're not done, but you can see from the leaders that are affirming this conference, on the first night, that's every great leader in this nation, speaking into this moment, standing hand in hand, watching what Pastor Adam's doing today, honoring a church that's technically not under the New Life movement, but bringing them up on stage. The guys yesterday, I mean, that stuff's dangerous for the kingdom, and it's contagious. And what you're seeing here is really that there's one church. There's only one church in this nation, and it's not Brave or Connect or New Life or Arise or Life or Harborside. It's just the Church of Jesus Christ. and actually just being able to say we were here when this thing started for this season, and of course, obviously, your beautiful faces is probably the best part of it.
Great answers, guys.
We love you guys.